What's the story, our lad? What's the story, our? What's the story, our lad? What's the story, our? Our!
All right, our lad.
Grand, our lad! Good evening, good.
Great start.
Great start. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to What's the Story Hour, and we're coming to you from the old session room. We're back in the session room, right?
Back in the session room. No smell of fish tonight.
No.
Terrific to report.
Looks quite nice, actually. Nice and clean. Yeah. It's lovely, isn't it? Must know we're coming.
Must have known we were coming all right. I didn't have to move Anton around when I came in today, so delighted with that. Good crowd in the Lala as well, enjoying the old grub in there.
You enjoy it while the weather's half decent, you know, because it's not very good.
That's it. Great drying out today, though.
Jeez, I have to say I had a great time with the old Rush Festival last week.
The Rush Festival.
It was fucking great.
I was nearly going to go over on Monday for the
air show.
The air show, and I was like, nah, I said, there's the Bray Air display, and then it was like the Rush Air show. I was like, nah, I said, I can't. In my head, that was going to be terrible, so I just didn't go near it.
We went out on the Sunday night. We went to the Strand for dinner, and the Strand is a lovely. The food is fantastic. Went for breakfast as well the next day. I was living in it basically for 2 days.
Jeez.
Food was fantastic. Drink is fantastic. But we went to the festival thing on the Sunday night, and they had the one day stuff you doing the quiz or what do you call that thing? Bingos.
Bingo.
One of the funniest nights ever. Best €15 ever spent. I swear to God, out of that.
Over in Rush.
You know the way the world is too serious today, and everyone can't say that. Well, put it this way: if you're easily offended, you wouldn't have went to this gig. It was the funniest thing ever.
Yeah.
The fucking crack was not. I'm not joking. Just laugh.
Was
I was looking at the darts.
Was your man there? Your man on the fucking big board on his quad bike. See him?
Oh, I've seen him, yeah. I've seen him on the Monday, yeah. We were going down to Harvard on Monday, and he was going by, and the Tegan was going, and Eliza was going, want to go over and hug him.
Yeah.
Total opposites, you know.
Fuck's sake. But, so, good time had anyway. Good time
Great
had.
time, out lad. Drank myself to death.
Good stuff.
Ate myself to death as well. Yes. Great time.
Good stuff. That's it. That's what bank holiday weekends were all about, our lad.
That's it, our lad, yeah.
But, so look, we'll move on to, as I always say, your favourite part of the week now, Frag.
Oh, yes, right. It's time for this week's Random Pony. Well, it's just a bit of Random Pony, yeah. Well, right. Now, football's back tomorrow.
Football's back tomorrow.
Can't fucking wait.
I tell you, the kitchen in your house being no-go zone now every Saturday and Sunday.
Fucking right, it will be. I won't watch tomorrow night's match, but Saturday, Sunday, I ain't moving.
Yeah, I can only imagine. No. What have you got? The bottles of Corona in now? Or
the Guinness is for Sunday and the Crown is for Saturday. Yeah, don't. I swear to God, nobody come near me, contact me, nothing.
Yeah.
It's... Yeah.
Good. No, it's kind of snuck up on me, to be honest. Coming back, just kind of, it seems to come back earlier and earlier every year.
But it's not back that early. You know what I mean? It's back on time, really, this season.
Yeah, no, it's just kind of, I don't know. To me, look, it's not going to make a blind bit of difference to my life out of it. If I'm at home, I'll watch the football. Otherwise, I won't give a fuck, to be honest. But,
well, Ray, who's been bowling the big?
Well, I'm going to start you off with gobshite.
Well, they normally are.
They normally are. The Rob's gobshite, to be honest. But a particular gobshite this week, you might have heard there was a bit of a commotion down the town yesterday morning.
No.
So I'll give you a headline. This has been picked up by news agencies all across Europe because...
Excuse me.
I'd assume, to be honest, because it's so fucking stupid. I'll give you a headline here from ITV, which is, bomb disposal unit called to Balbriggan Garda station after device brought in. Have you not heard this, no?
No, talk to me.
So somebody, right, found what they thought was, an incendiary device, a bomb. So what did they do with it? They picked it up and they brought it to the Garda station. Now, if they thought it was a bomb, what are you bringing it into a place where people work? A residential area.
It wasn't like the police.
I mean, what sort of half ahead do you have to be to do something like that? You know what I mean? If there's a bomb, I better bring it into a a heavily populated area. Just unbelievable. As I said, picked up, there's news reports from all over the world on this. And again, as I said, I would imagine that's owing to the stupidity. But the Army Bomb Disposal Unit come in anyway.
What was it?
Huh?
What was it?
They haven't given out much information. So, I don't know.
Could have went and fucked it down on the beach or something.
It could have been, but it could be happening, I suppose. An owl grenade or something. World War II.
Could have thrown it down to the Browns. Finished off the job.
Saved everybody a job.
Or the old Tesco. I don't think you can do any more damage to that.
No, that's... Yeah. But, so the Gardaí said that a member of the public entered the station with a device found nearby. The device was rendered stable and taken to a safe location where the Defence Forces bomb disposal unit, dealt with it accordingly. Jesus. But so they blew it up. Essentially, is what they did with it. But just,
where was it found, Aaron?
come on! It didn't say exactly. It just said nearby. I'd assume down the beach. To be honest, would be my guess. Or if a farmer was ploughing a field or something like that. If anyone has any more information, let us know, because as it stands right now, whoever this person is a moron until proven otherwise. But moving on to...
They didn't like the police, right?
Maybe not, but why would you bring a bomb? You were going to blow up as well. Do you know what I mean? If shit goes out there, do you know?
This guy, I was asked about, someone asked me a question yesterday.
About bombs?
No, it was great. It was Andrada. My nephew's girlfriend, he goes, what do you think of Moneymore? Andrada, and I said, Moneymore is about the top 10 most visited places in the world by the cops. Sorry, Abby. Only joking. Anybody from Moneymore listening, I'm only messing.
I'll give you one bit of court news anyway from this week, Rag. So, headline reads: thief squared up the Gardaí over €4 bottle of cider.
For fuck's sake.
So already this is going to be... Yeah, so basically David from...
What, were they fighting over who wanted it?
No. So I'll tell you now. So David, 34 years old, from Balbriggan, basically was full as a boot, went into Super Value and tried to steal a bottle of cider. So he was followed by the security, and then he ran off. So they called the guards. So he arrived back to Super Value, where he proceeded to try and drink the bottle of cider in front of the Gardaí and the security. Everything else, That's
a good way of doing it, isn't it?
He resisted arrest and displayed high levels of aggression, and ended up getting pepper sprayed.
Oh,
right. So the long and short of it, he said he'd been heavily on the beer, and he was trying to steal more alcohol to continue the session. His solicitor said that the defendant had very little recollection of the incident due to his drunkenness. So basically, long and short of this one, I suppose, 69 previous convictions. Took 4 Gardaí and security.
You're not wrong, something better than €4 bottle of fucking cider.
Well, you think with all this kind of...
Bottle of gin.
What would you say? You think with all that carry on, it would... what is a €4 bottle of cider then? Is it like...
I know what it is. It's one of them Linden Village bottles, but it wouldn't be like a flagon, or it'd be like...
it's like the 1 litre.
Yeah, 1 litre bottle. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it would be you. That makes sense.
Well, yeah.
Or it could be a shitty fucking flagon of white lightning or something.
White lightning, yeah. But so he was basically, he was... the case was adjourned until November, as the judge thinks that, that this fella David could benefit from working with the probation services. So they're giving him a chance to clean up his act, I suppose. But causing a commotion over a €4 bottle of cider, Frank. That's... There you go. But that's it from me.
It's the little things that matter, isn't it? The little things that get you into trouble, right?
Well, yeah. The stupid things get you
into trouble. In fairness, if I was going to rob a bottle, I'd rob a bottle of gin or a bottle of vodka. proper.
Something that was
You know what
worth
I
your
mean?
while,
Like,
Steve.
20 something quid's worth maybe.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
no
not
sham-
gonna lie,
no
but
champagne.
you know, bought a cider for you. You're not gonna get fragged too drunk now, is it?
No. And I mean, let's look at it like this. If it's €4, you probably just go, fuck it, I'll pay for it. Like, you know what I mean?
Good 4 to 5 then, get me going.
God, cider, fucking heartburn in a bottle. That's that.
Yeah, I was drinking Bulman last Sunday and I had about 4 and I said, right, Guinea time.
Can't do it. Tears the
Drinking the Guinea out of the fucking plastic cup. Wasn't bad, actually. Nicer than that Rockshore piss.
Oh, the
Rockshore's to be just taken off the market completely. I fucking hate it, right? It's shit. Bring back Budweiser. I'm going to start a fucking campaign.
Bring back. Why is Budweiser gone?
Yeah, it's gone in a lot of places because it was a place by that fucking imposter. Fucking Rockshore.
The imposter.
It's I don't know how people drink it, Ray. There's no taste of it. It's like fucking water.
I've drank it when I've had to drink it.
It's fucking
you know what I mean?
shite.
There's no gigs and things like that where it's your only option. But
Wasn't going to go into a rant there, guys, but that's just where it's just where it went. Anyway, Ray, it's time to talk the shite that we normally talk on Random Pony every week, and this week is like no other week on Random Pony. Let me start this off here.
Go on.
God, there's some fucking weirdos out there. Man with 6 wives wants surrogate child, so he doesn't make any of his partners get jealous. So the way I'm looking at it is, right, if he's going to get a surrogacy, right,
yeah.
they're all going to be fucking jealous, aren't they?
And are they all going to be considered the mother, like?
Yeah, I never thought like that, actually.
Has this child now got 6 mothers?
Probably, yeah. Well, clearly. Who's the Maddo?
I don't even want to think
I've had this
about- I don't even
conversation
want to think
before.
about that one.
Lads with 9 wives and 10 wives and all that, lads. Tell you one thing. You want to be whacking some Viagra for starters, right? But still, one wife is fucking enough.
Well, yeah. I mean, jeez.
Like, imagine having 6 wives.
Imagine the headache that... You know, and I would say, you know, we're not being sexist here. I would say, I'd imagine if you're one woman with 6 husbands, it would be the same.
That'd
It
be
would
terrible.
the same.
Jeez, that'd be desperate,
You
wouldn't
know,
it?
or whatever way, you know, whatever way the gate swings for you, if you had 6 partners.
God love a woman who's married to 6 of me. Or 6 of you, Ray. Jesus Christ. Which one is worse?
That's what bear thinking about.
No, we move on.
We move on. I just not.
Well, here's one for you. Remember I was talking about AI earlier? Mm-hmm. Remember we were saying AI, right? So, husband snoring pushed me into cheating with AI robot when he's in spare room.
What?
Yes, okay. So basically...
It's like an episode of Black Mirror or something.
Right,
So it is.
basically, your man snoring is out of control. So
Right.
the wife can't sleep beside him anymore because it's just horrendous.
Yeah.
So even when he goes into the spare room, it's still horrendous. You can still hear him all over the gaff. Horrendous, right? Like tonight I was walking home from the pub, and I could hear me out at the top of the Bar Road flats. But yeah, so what happens is, so she was lying there anyway during the night, awake.
Yeah.
So she started going into the computer and having the rendezvous with an AI, having an sexual, how do I say it? Sexual fantasy conversations.
With an AI.
Yeah. So like she was getting to the stage where she couldn't wait to go to bed, so she'd go off and have an quickie with Dr. Robotnik.
I don't know what to make of that, or lad. Like, that's...
This is where the world's gone, man.
That's bizarre. I mean, you know, look, we leave the AI aside from in here. There are many, you know, fucking pieces of kit you can get to remedy, you know, bad snoring. This is just a fact. There's plenty of them. You can buy them on the internet. You can get surgeries done that are, you know, not very invasive. You can. I mean, seriously, like, you know, your answer to your husband snoring is strumming the box off yourself to fucking chat GPT. Like, that's
R2D2, huh?
what the fuck.
Robocop. Call me Robocop.
Oh, Robocock, fuck's sake.
think there's been one of them
There probably has, actually.
dirty films with that name.
But, that's...
You know, next week's episode it's going to be on AI.
Move on. I can't think about that anymore.
See how you feel with this one, right? We're not talking about robots now, right? I fainted at work. I'm embarrassed because my boss said it was unprofessional. Now,
Unprofessional.
Let me throw this out to you,
Right, go on.
She's a healthcare professional, okay? So obviously she's working as a health, so she's working with patients at all the time. But she's feeling unwell one day,
Yeah.
and she fainted. And her boss said to her, "That's unprofessional." Now, I don't know about you or about me, Ray, but that's a load of bollocks.
You'd be told where to go, where here.
Bollocks, I know it. I'd be going tribunal.
The workplace, was it the...
Hang on, if somebody falls ill at work, it's not their fault.
No, of course
How
not.
the fuck can it be their fault?
Faint. I've never seen anybody faint. I don't know what it'd look like. I'd be curious. Either way, yeah, that's bullshit. I'd be straight to HR with that sort of thing. I'd be like, listen,
I'd be putting in a harassment case.
that's fucking out of order.
That's what I'd be doing.
Although speaking of, the labour course and stuff, do you see our man today? He was a traffic warden.
No.
And he went to the labour court because he got a pay rise that was negotiated through SIP2.
Right.
And he didn't want the pay rise because he didn't agree to it. And he went to court to try and basically sue his job because he got a pay rise. I've never heard such fucking nonsense in my life,
My head is not able for this.
This sort of mean, every week, I think we should stop doing this. Every week, my just faith in humanity's ability to fucking survive the next fucking century.
Yeah, when you're having steamy sessions with robots, you know all about it.
Oh, Jesus fucking Christ, I don't know. Fucking going to court because you got a pay rise. Fucking, as I said, Robocop.
Trying to sue someone because they didn't crash into you.
You know what I mean? Like, just ludicrous.
Well, Ray, explain to the listeners what we have on tonight.
Yeah, now coming up after this, a bit of fucking sanity here now. It's grand. We're not going to have too much talking anymore.
No, we'll be just listening tonight.
Yeah, well, for the most part.
Yeah.
I imagine. We'll see how it pans out. But lads, we have, you all know him, I suppose, the face of Balbriggan Library for, quite a long time. Very well regarded member of the Balbriggan Historical Society.
Or the Hysterical Society, as Tom Selleck called
the
it, apparently.
Hysterical Society. So we have Jim Walsh coming up next for you, in what we're hoping is going to be, somewhat, I'd imagine, disjointed, but, a series of podcasts nonetheless, relating to, the history of Balbriggan, the weird, the wonderful. Jim has told us some stuff already, in terms of, where the names of estates and streets and all this sort of stuff has come from.
Which is fantastic, I think, and it's something a little bit different that we haven't really done before, so yes, bear with us, and hopefully you're going to enjoy the interview because we're looking forward to it.
Exactly, that's it. So that's coming up for you next, lads. And we're back here, lads. And as promised, we're sitting here now with Jim Walsh, the font of knowledge, as I said, the face of Balbriggan Library for many a year, Jim, and obviously, well-regarded member of the Balbriggan Historical Society, and you're here to tell us a few tales.
Yeah.
A few tales.
Thanks for coming on, Jim. Great to have you here.
Welcome, lads. You're welcome, lads. Thanks for the invitation. I can't believe I'm sitting in Dr. Carr's room here.
No, it's all historic.
Absolutely fantastic building. You mentioned the library, and I suppose I should tell you something briefly about how I got involved in local history in the first place.
Yeah.
It probably really began with my life as a librarian. I was born around in Cravian Park, you probably know, the eldest of 13 children. Father Fintan Walsh was carpenter born in 1926 in Quality Row. People of his generation will know where I'm referring to.
Yeah.
Number 2, and then he was reared at Harbour Terrace, those 4 red brick buildings down in Key Street, Harbour Villas, and then he was reared at number 1 Gibbons Terrace. And we were reared at number 74 Cravian Park. Mm-hmm. As we know, Cravian Park was built by Joe Rooney in the late 40s. People moved in the early 50s, and I often wondered whether it was a coincidence because we were directly opposite his father. My grandfather, Jimmy Walsh, came into Balbriggan in about 1926. I could write a novel about him.
Yeah.
2 novels. It's quite a tragic and amazing life story. Married twice, etc., etc. But he came in, he went through Artane Industrial School. His first wife died when he was 25. His young son died. And then he came into Balbriggan in 1926. He married a local lady, Mary Gertrude Davy, from number 1 St. Peter's Terrace. And in fact, she was born in Padstow in 1900. And her father, George Thomas Davy, was born in 1871 in Padstow. And people who watch those programs, that English chef, what's his name, began from Padstow. Not Keith Floyd, the other guy, he's often into television anyway. So her father, George Thomas Davy, was a stoker in the Royal Navy. He joined the British Coast Guard during the turn of the century, which included here. Mm-hmm. He ended up serving, we had a Coast Guard station in 1864. When he retired, they got number 1 Gibbons, St. Peter's Terrace. So she married Jimmy Walsh in 1926. And on his marriage certificate, it stated that he was a soldier in the Free State Army. I'm not sure for how long. But he started work with Joe Rooney, who was a local builder at the time. And then he moved on then, and he was involved in several building projects in the town. He was very, very socially involved in the town. He was involved with the Gaelic League, my grandfather Jimmy. Yeah. He was chairman of the town commissioners for the Labour Party. He was the builder of the Savoy Cinema in 1944 on Dublin Street. Yeah. And you can imagine the excitement now, it's because that opened, to have a new sculpting, that opened on Christmas Week 1944 during World War II. The excitement of it. And the first projection was a guy called Linus Tolan, and his assistant was Jack Benton. For years, I was very, very, very friendly with Jack Benton. Yeah. He was a great local man, great amateur photographer, a great help to us in the Historical Society. Unfortunately, he's passed away, as has his wife, Chris. Mm-hmm. And the very first film that opened the Savoy Cinema on Christmas Week 1944 was The Phantom of the Opera, starring Claude Rains. But a few years later then, Jimmy Walsh, my grandfather, they built the golf club in 1945 and Balbriggan National School in 1948, the year of my birth. And my father and his 2 brothers, Declan and Ollie, as the years went on, were all also apprenticed to Jimmy. So, in fact, I think Balbriggan School, where we all went to in our family, because my mother was in the Men of War, Kate Morgan, and she and her family used to go down to the old school in the back lane of Balbriggan. That was a chapel built in 1722 during penal times. Then it served as a national school. And the remains of it are still there in the back lane, at the back of the press. Yeah.
The school lane there.
Yeah, that's right. The remains are there. And then when they built, bless Oliver Plunkett School in 48, because he wasn't canonised then, it ceased to be a school as such, and people then moved into it. So I would have been a generation who went to a Balbriggan school, say from 1956 onwards type of thing. Now, I've actually digressing now. What brought me on to Balbriggan School? You'd have to... I tend to digress. A few senior moments, lads. That's my interest. Okay, so then I remember about the age of 12, people often ask me, why are you interested in local history? I'm often thinking about that today, lads, before I come in. I can't answer it. It's something instinctive. Maybe I want to escape the present. Maybe I can't plan. Maybe it's an escape, I just want to know. But for some reason, I'm fascinated about the past, how people got together, even how people met when they first met, etc., etc. I don't know why I do it, but it interests me. I remember once at the age of 12 in Balbriggan National School, a man called Paddy Murphy. And Paddy Murphy then was a legend. He was in Killalane. From humble origins, he got an education. He went to the Old Tech. The Old Tech in Balbriggan used to be in Clonard Street, where Burroughs' factory is now.
Oh, right.
Yeah. There are photographs of the foundation so he went there, and then he rose up in union ranks. He eventually, before he retired, he was vice president of the Workers' Union of Ireland, but in a private capacity he was a brilliant local researcher. Yeah, Labour man, a very clever mind, but never published a thing in his life and never revealed his sources, which is a bit unfortunate. But I was very lucky to have his ear, and over the years he would ring me at 12 o'clock at night, I'd be in bed, and for an hour he'd be dispensing gems of knowledge. So I stored him up there. But he died. He never ever published an item. But I remember as a child, about 12, he came to Balbriggan School and he gave a talk about the parks and crofts of Balbriggan. 1641 to 1841. And he always stopped at 1841. So that anybody says, well, now, our family are here for 200 years. He was able, very sorry, he says, no, I'm not going into that. And all he had was a copybook.
Yeah.
But when we founded the Historical Society in 1981, one of the first presenters they asked to give a talk to the new society was Paddy Murphy. And for 2 successive years, I think it was 1982, 1983, we had a room in the hotel then. He packed the place out. He had a certain reputation among people of the town. He had espoused the rights of agricultural workers over the years. He had a job at the EC. He was well got.
Yeah.
And anyway, he gave a paper to us. One, the Parks and Cross of Balbriggan. The next one was the Parks and Cross of the Man of War. But you never got to see the text, and you never got to know the sources, whatever. So my interest began then, I think. And then when I was 13, I remember, it's a good story of yourself, lads. I've never told this before. At the age of 13, I heard, you mentioned the library. There was a talk by a man called Paddy Daly upstairs in the library. For years, upstairs in the library wasn't used for library purposes. It was just used for meetings, ceilidhs, classes, you name it.
Yeah.
And at 13, Paddy Murphy, or Paddy Daly, was a sort of, like Paddy Murphy, who was a legend in his own time. Paddy Daly came in from Navan as a manager of Spicers.
Oh, okay.
And before I go back to Paddy Daly, this may be of interest to your listeners. Our next presentation, Historical Society, we have a public talk in the hotel on Wednesday the 13th of August, 8 o'clock. And Frank Verity from Balbriggan, Jazz Verty's son, living in Skerry so many years, a fantastic researcher. Mm-hmm. Frank has done a degree in local history, has published 2 books, done any amount of articles for various publications, and he's researched the history of Spice Bakery from the time it began in Balbriggan in 1900 right up to the end of it. It's marvellous stuff. People who've never come to our talks are welcome to walking off the street. They don't have members of society. It's a £5 on the night. Marvellous stuff. Paddy Daly was writing stuff almost the time he came into Balbriggan. Because I remember coming across poems he wrote as early as 1924 when St. Malaga's Terrace. Now, do you know where St. Malaga's Terrace is, lads? You do. But lots of people don't, but fair play to you.
Yeah,
But I do.
That's where he delivers the post.
Well, of course you would. You're a good man for this, St. Malaga's Terrace. And that's another story another night, the whole story of Malaga about the church and the bees and all the rest.
Yeah.
That's a whole story. And the ghost of the monk and all the rest back in the 70s. Okay? I'll tell the story again. Have it out there. You have it too.
But anyway, laughed at that before. And
he was a wordsmith and he was a Gaelic scholar. He was actually very involved in cricket in Balbriggan. He was a jack of all trades. Mm-hmm. He also played with Navan O'Mahony's in the 1880s or 90s when they won one of the first All-Ireland football championships, when they were played between clubs rather than counties. And Gaelic scholars, there was something about it as a draw, whatever happened. But I remember years ago, his daughter Eily Daly had the medal that he won with Navan O'Mahony's. But I remember anyway, this Paddy Daly was about to give a talk in the library, and I later got the text of the talk from Eily. He died about a year later. He was an elderly man then, and it was published in 2 parts in the Draw Independent, the story about Roger and Boscatten. So I was packed with people upstairs, and I went along with a friend of mine called David Donnelly from Derham Park. We were friends growing up years ago. I invited him to come along, you see. Now we're sitting up because all the seats were taken. And years later, 30 or 40 years later, I played around the golf with David one morning. I did quite well. He was a much better golfer than I was. And I went into the library in Balbriggan. It was a late day, Tuesday, 2 to half 8. I got a phone call. You won a prize, will you come up? Most unusual for me to win a prize. And David was a brilliant golfer. He was there before me. We got chatting. And before the prizes were awarded, I said, David, do you remember 30 or 40 years ago, the 2 of us went down to the hotel, or the library? Oh, yeah, Paddy Daly. He says, I must have been interested in local history even then. Go away with that, you see. The only reason we went was because we heard there was free tea and biscuits. And, I wouldn't put it past them. I think that could have been the call. But I was never to realise years later. So I worked in the libraries for 40 years, and 1966 onwards in Dublin City Libraries. Mm-hmm. And first place I was sent to was Drumcondra Library for 2 weeks training, and then I spent so many years in the mobile libraries. That's another story. Mm-hmm. My life in Dublin City Libraries and county libraries that I have researched the history of the libraries in Fingal,
Yeah.
and also Balbriggan Library. So we did that another night, and such.
Yeah.
So that then, when I moved from the City Libraries in 1980, I got a promotion, and for my sins was sent out 23.5 miles each day in the back roads to open a new library in Roselawn Shopping Centre in Castleknock or Blanchardstown. There was no purpose-built library there. And when that was finished, then I was moved into Balbriggan, and the Carnegie Library had been gutted and emptied. So a team of 4 of us were moved in, we put everything in the shelves. All the books were bought in advance and were stored in Blanchardstown Library, which meant up there, take all the boxes, take the best books out of the boxes, put them onto a mobile library, carry them onto a mobile library, carry them back into the library, shelve them. For many years, people used to say to me, do you think just librarians sit and read books? That's the last thing we ever get a chance to do, is read a book in the library. You bring it home and you read it, you know. It's not as sedentary as people think. But I just thought the council did a wonderful job on that new library. It opened on the 15th of May, 1981. And we spent a year moving all the new books in. Mm-hmm. But the architect, his name eludes me at the moment, is trying to take up the day, from Lusk. He did a marvellous job, because he put up a brand new children's library, as you both remember, upstairs.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I know it's a steep stairs, and as far as I know, no child ever fell up or down that stairs, ever, as far as I know. And I mean, it was quite steep. Yeah. And as you remember, inside the turret, the clock tower, there's a lovely reading corner.
Yeah.
Now, that was brand new, and it was just a joy to work there.
Was that the window?
Yeah.
I know, I used to be out there messing all the time.
that was you, wasn't it?
That was prime real estate, that was.
It was
when
lovely,
you were
wasn't
there.
it? It was just lovely.
Wow. You'd be raging if you were in the library. You know, I would have been in there a bit.
Yeah.
My mum would be downstairs, so I'd go up.
Yeah.
You'd be raging to see 3 or 4 people over in it already. You'd be like,
And do you remember?
I just want to read my Goosebumps book. Like.
Goosebumps. Do you remember there was the windows had to be the glass had to be removed, because I think for the danger. Mm-hmm. I think it was what was called polyurethane, which meant the view wasn't great. Yeah. But it was so that you couldn't fall out. But you remember in the steps we had 4 listening posts, audio posts, and you could request to listen to a tape and listen to it.
That's right.
That was the only library in Dublin City or County, or possibly in the Republic, that was that avant-garde.
Yeah.
And upstairs, in a space above the children's library, we had the actual audio machines.
Yeah.
So you'd pick a tape and we'd run upstairs and put it on for you. So that was all part of a Balbriggan library then, you know. We're ahead of the curve, and no sooner had we opened that I got another promotion. I was very lucky. I was sent to Malahide Library for 10 years. But when Balbriggan reopened in 15th of May 1981, I'd been very fortunate to have been given some time to set up or organise local history files for the library.
Yeah.
Because as part of my qualifications for librarianship, I did a thing called a fellowship with the Library Association, of course, from 70s to about 78. And apart from studying catalogue and classification, all this sort of thing, I had to do a thesis. And naively, I chose a thesis. It was a bibliography of printed materials relating to Fingal. But I didn't just confine myself to flora and fauna or geography or history.
Yeah.
I remember going to the director of the Library Council and saying, "You're mad, this will take your lifetime." Anyway, I didn't listen. It took me 7 years going in and out of the National Library, month after month, year after year, locating anything I could find, ever written, in any documentation with anywhere in Fingal. It was crazy, but I did it. And then it had to be done to an international standard, which meant it had to be classified and catalogued and indexed. And then about 1978, it was ready to go. And no professional typist could touch it with a barge pole. It was so detailed. But when I did my leaving cert in 1966, for some reason I wanted to be a writer. And I had 2 years of typing in the tech at night, the old typewriters, one finger at a time.
Yeah.
But typical of me, I applied myself. So I got a diploma in typing, which I hadn't lived. I had no life experience, so I had nothing to write about. Yeah. But I came in years later, I typed my own thesis, got the fellowship, whatever. And in the process, I learned about all of these sources that were out there that were unknown to most people and also unobtainable. I mean, in years gone by, if you wanted to look, let's go back to the 1970s, you want to get a book about the history of Balbriggan or Balbriggan about Scadden. Well, there's no such thing.
Yeah.
There was no such thing. And the only two books that you could even go looking for then, the two standard books for years, they were the two Bibles you could turn to. And the first book was a book called The History of Dublin, big volume, by John Dalton, 1838. Now, that was published in 1838, and it gives 3 or 4 or 5 pages on Balrodry, Balscadden, Balbriggan, before its time.
Yeah.
And then if you had the wherewithal at the time, you could go into the National Library and write it all out if you're lucky. Some families over the years were able to buy copies originally. Now, lucky enough, in 1977, copyright was over, and Tower Press of Cork reissued it. And would I spend a tenner on it? No, too hard myself. And immediately went out of print, and it's now a collector's item.
Yeah.
And the second was a 2-volume book called Gazetteer of Ireland by a guy called Samuel Lewis. Even better still, 8 was Ed, so B for Balbriggan, whatever.
Yeah.
And that was published in 1837. It was even better. That was reissued in 1980. So there was nothing out there anyway.
Yeah.
Etc. you could turn to. But then by doing my thesis and looking at various sources, I became aware of items in newspaper cuttings and journals, etc., etc. And therefore, what I really wanted to do was, then I thought, so I set up the local history file in Balbriggan. I was given some weeks to go in and put it together. Also Ardgillan, also the Knoll, etc. And I put a junior file upstairs. And I couldn't believe the interest people were showing. And my colleague then was a guy called Don Griffin. I'm still in contact with him. He's not from Balbriggan. He wasn't interested in local history, but he was very concerned in helping me because he could see the interest I had. So that year in 1981, I thought, sure, maybe we'd put up a few posters around the town. And we were talking to people like Mamie Keown in the library, and her husband Pat, who by that stage was our library attendant, lovely man. Since passed away. Pat was a gentleman. Yeah. Everybody loved Pat coming into the library.
Absolutely.
Often, people come in to see Pat. He was the first face, a lovely gentleman. And unfortunately he's passed, but I like to remember that. So we put a few posters up around the town, and about 30, 40 people to up, I suppose, and most of the talking. And Don backed me up, and there was a general consensus. A man called Liam Fitzgerald McGarrald from Peter's Terrace was a Gaelgoer, and he come up on the night. He said, "What about Cummins Strulagus Culture of Balbriggan and Cultural Historical Society, whatever." So then we had to elect the committee. Of course, I suppose what do? You walk into it, you can't walk away.
Yeah.
So we said we're going for it. We'll form a society, but I had to go to 2 groups for a constitution because I hadn't a clue what a constitution was for a society. I was learning as I went along myself. Yeah. So we went to Skerry's Historical Society, who were founded in 1948. And there was a group or umbrella body called the Association of Fingal Historical Societies in the 70s, set up by a bit of a legend himself called William Monks from the Nevet, an uncle of Jim Monks. And Willie, again a bit like Paddy Murphy, very rarely publishes material, but had done a fair amount of research. And what happened then was members of this umbrella society or association once a month would meet in Murcibble Lock or somewhere. Yeah. You go for a pint. So we started off, starting from scratch. We went to their meetings, befriended these people who were very, very helpful to us. Yeah. And then we turned to these people at our very first presentations in 1981. So our very first presentation at the hotel was not by a local man, a man called Brendan Scally. And he got up and talked about the Gaelic place names of Fingal. But that was his forte. He knew his stuff. Yeah. The next man, all these people have passed on now. Bob Brown from Donabate, a lovely man, and lived in Skerry's, and he gave a talk about the history of the Dromna Railway. Okay. And then I decided to step forward for the first time with my very first slides at Balbriggan. I was taking slides in the late 70s, rather than pictures. Yeah. And we had to be very careful because in the 1970s, there was an historical society for a brief period of time. I remember Father James Murphy called a meeting. I think it was in the town hall. And I went to it. The crowd turned up. Yeah. There's a follow-up meeting downstairs in the hotel. I went to it. But I'd be very careful. But shall we say all the local prelates and curates and town worthies were on the committee straight away. And I thought, perhaps it wasn't for me. Yeah. But they did several presentations. They were good people. They meant well. So when I called this meeting at the hotel with my colleague Don Griffin, I made sure that the people who formed a free society were welcome and knew about it. Yeah. And they were. And in fact, one of their committee members years later came in to me with a few bob that they had and a few things that they passed on to us. So we didn't step on anybody's toes. So we went with it, and this is 41 years on now. We published about 10 books. We do 2 presentations, 6 presentations a year. At the moment, they're on the last Wednesday of every month in the hotel.
Yeah.
We'd like to use the town hall because we're crucified in the hotel, the cost of the room. But we can't get into the hotel.
Where in the town hall is that to use?
Sorry?
Where in the town hall can you use?
It's the replacement for the original town hall. Well, the first town hall was built in 1900.
Yeah.
That was the one at the back of the library.
Come down to the old town hall. It's great.
Yeah. I loved it.
Oh, we did, yes.
That opened in May 1900. I have a programme with the opening. And now, then in the 30s, Father, is a good story here, lads. It's not in any of the books, so I'll tell it to you now.
Yeah, go
which
ahead.
is good. In the 1930s, a curate called Father Doherty, he came up and with the permission of Canon Hickey, they decided they wanted to build a school in Chapel Street. Now, it was later opened in 1935, St. Peter and Paul's.
Okay.
So they decided to open a cinema in the town hall. They call it the Strand Cinema. And there are picture postcards of the square, and you can see the first 3 letters of Strand. And they put on the stage, and there was gas lighting. I remember years and years ago, Society started first. People, I remember going there to the old cinema. You see, but it was the idea was that the funds were to go to the new school. When the new school opened in 1935, Father, whatever, he kept the school going.
Yeah.
And much to the chagrin and disappointment, a number of local businessmen, because in the diocesan archives, where I've done a good bit of research over the years for this book here, I came across letters to the Archbishop from the same businessmen saying they thought there had been a business or a gentleman's agreement with Father Doherty. So they went ahead and built their own cinema in Dublin Street, which I earlier referred to.
Yeah. So
all of a sudden, Balbriggan then had 2 cinemas. And in 1936, they built the new town hall, which opened in 1937. So you talk about progress. At one stage, we had 2 town halls and we had 2 cinemas. End of story.
That's mad.
Yeah. I was gassed anyway. So now, where are we at the moment? Local history. So basically, that's what we do. And just to let you know, folks, to any listeners we may have, if they haven't turned off by now,
I won't be listening until tomorrow.
we're doing a walkabout. There's a beach festival. We did do one every year and it's on the 20th, I think. It's a Sunday, and it's at 2:00. Last year we did it. We gathered underneath the arch, and we had audio equipment, and maybe myself and 2 other members of the committee, our chairman Brian Howley, and also our PRO. We just take people around the harbour.
Yeah.
We normally. I like to bring people down to the lighthouse. For years, I'd walk down there. You know yourselves, lads, the sunspot, and you can sit back there. And one thing I have is a prodigious memory. I can just plot from the skyline how the way the town developed. You know.
Yeah.
If you have a crowd, and it's a summer's day, it's lovely. And sometimes then, excuse me, there are 2 plaques that you might have seen on the lighthouse.
Yeah.
One dates from 1761, and the other is 1957. And we sometimes attract boys and girls 12, 13 years of age who love history, and their parents bring them along.
Yeah.
And they always bring them forward and they say, would you like to read that out? And they do.
Yeah.
And before the walkabout's over, we give a copy of our books to at least one of them. And they're just delighted. And so are the parents. And if we do nothing other than just once a year, encourage that person to go along, whatever.
No, it's pretty good, that, Jim. It's I think having you on there tonight is even like if more people could get involved in that, because I'm fascinated by sitting there listening to
you're welcome. Always looking for new members, always looking for membership. As I said, because people come and go. A lot of the elderly people. I actually, for the record, and I wasn't going to do this, but lads, but a lot of them have passed on. May I just give everybody the name of the very first committee in 1981 who started up? And I've mentioned the 3, I suppose. Don Griffin was our secretary. I was chairperson. Marion Cran, you might know Marion Balbriggan. For years, she was married to Peter Wherity.
Of course, I know Marion.
Marion. She was great.
Yeah.
And she was married to Peter, and unfortunately passed away about a year ago.
Peter, love him bits.
A legend, you know. The Peacocks.
One of the most wittiest people I'll ever meet.
Oh, yeah. Very clever man.
Oh, yeah.
And he was brilliant. He used to teach chess voluntarily to the children in the library for years.
His handwriting was fantastic
as
well.
Whenever I met him, I used to call him Don Corleone because he was always dressed impeccably with the hair slicked back. And when it came to the World Cup, he always followed Germany.
Yeah.
So Marion, anyway, just give her a mention, you know. And then Pat McKeown was on the committee, of course, in May. And over the years then we alternated. So May was chairperson for 3 years, and then Michael Bannon was on the committee for the first year, and he was but he didn't serve for too long, he had too many demands. Another ladies that served were Antonia Casson, sister of the actor Barry Casson.
Yeah.
She passed on. Bernie Healy, the mother of all the lads, the Fleur and the lads, she was Bernie Carey, she served in the committee. Eileen McKenna from Craven Park, Eileen is now 100 years of age.
That's right, yeah.
She's a great woman.
Yes.
Also, over the years it didn't change. Josie Cunningham served, people who've passed on served, etc. So we had a very good local base.
Yeah.
I say, go back to 1981, if people had local inquiries, you could say it was a much different town, population 3,500. The local library where May worked and the local library where I and Pat worked were the places to go if you wanted a piece of information. You know, when you think of it, if May didn't know it, I might know the answer, or vice versa, type of thing, you know. Times have changed. So what I might do now, lads, is that's giving a bit of history of the Historical Society. Yeah. What I might do is just for a few moments is just reach to our very first book. Yeah. And it's called The Church St. Peter and Paul, Balbriggan, celebrating 150 years, 1842 to 1992. Mm-hmm. What happened was, in 1991, I got a phone call in the library for a man called Des Byrne, and he was managing director of Wavan for a good few years. Okay. He was also the second honorary president of the Historical Society for a decade. Very generous, because I went to him for sponsorship for a very, very first weekend exhibition in April of 82, in Town Hall. He sponsored it. Just a printing cost. I'll never forget. I had the whole thing printed up. And he never met me, I never met him, and I spoke for 10 minutes, and he just said, I'll never forget this, he said, are you speaking hundreds or thousands, he said. I was very, very tempted to say thousands. I said hundreds, and I pushed the A4 sheet forward, I typed it in my 400. And that sponsored the first 2-day exhibition in the hotel in April of 82. And we had people coming all Saturday and Sunday, and people come back with items. And we had a cheese and wine on the night for members, etc. And it was opened by a guy he was the folk director of the National Museum. I've always been keen, as a founding member of the Historical Society, that we are apolitical by nature, so that our research is not tainted by any political affiliations. Yeah. We've always gone down that line. So therefore, if we have a book launch or if we have something launch, we get somebody in librarianship or an archive or something like that. Yeah. Anybody in politics is welcome to be a member or a researcher or join our society. Of course they are, you know. Yeah. And they have been, but we try to stick to that. So end the story. Yep. Anyway, so in 1991, Des Byrne rang me to the library. That year, unknown to me, Wavan had quietly sponsored the restoration of 2 famous and unique stained glass windows that are still in St. Peter and Paul's Church. Yeah. And they're from the hand of the famous Harry Clark. They were commissioned by Canon Eugene Byrne in 1923. I'll be talking about him later and his role in the sack of Balbriggan. But he actually died in 1924 in April. And there was delay in the carrying out of the work because I believe the studios changed address. And I'll never know whether Canon Byrne ever got to see the installation of the 2 stained glass windows. I see. But if I have a look at them, you probably know where they are. Mm-hmm. You go into St. Peter and Paul's Church, at the top of the right-hand aisle and top of the left-hand aisle, they're facing each other. Yeah. And they're in his own hand, and one is signed. And the one is the Visitation of Elizabeth, and the other is the widow's son at Name. And sometimes I'm telling people where it is, and I'm saying it's in the men's aisle. Yeah. And people of my generation say, what do you mean? I said, I never seen dead in the women's aisle. Yeah. Because we always called the aisle on the right-hand side the men's aisle. Yeah. And I look at it now, statue of Our Lady, it should be, the women's aisle should be that side. Because, whatever, anyway, but that's gone back. And the families are then in the middle as such, isn't that right? Yeah. So, for years then, I didn't know of the existence of those windows or other imports, and most people didn't. And there was a statue blocking each view. Now, so having had Abbey stained glass windows come down to Balbriggan and restore the windows, and obviously we haven't sponsored it quietly, Des Byrne found out in conversation with Father O'Sullivan, our parish priest, that in the following year the priest wanted to do something to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the parish, and then asked, would his society do a book? So I said, we will. So I spent a year with a lady called, now she's in a home now, a resident of Skerries, a bit like Frank Werty, a brilliant researcher called Moraine Worku. Not from Skerries, but she has published several books, etc. And she and I spent about a year in and out of the Dublin Diocesan Archives in Clonlift. They're a wonderful source of material. And David Sheehy was the archivist. And I think partly because of her supporting role in this, it has stood a test of time. I'm not aware of any grammatical or spelling error in it.
Yeah.
And therefore, when I am doing a walkabout, I feel justified in bringing it with me and just quoting one or two sentences. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what I may do is, what I might do, lads, here now is, and I might just put my glass on for a few seconds, I'm looking at the very first page of text. And this very first sentence I wrote down back in 1991, and I say, unlike the neighbouring ancient manors of Balbriggan and Balscadden, they go back at least 500 years earlier to Norman times. The town of Balbriggan has a much shorter history. Returned in the civil survey of 1654 as, and I quote, the great farm of Balbriggan, and Balbriggan is spelled with an E, end of quote, belonging to Nicholas Barnwell of Turvey, and the little farm of Balbriggan, spelled with an I, belonging to Peter Barnwell of Terranure. I say, that's end of quote, Balbriggan was then no more than 2 townlands, occupying about 220 acres. The original town as we know it, say from the harbour up to the top of Dublin Street. Now, 3 years later, in 1659, there was a census of Ireland. The historians contend it wasn't a real census, it was an attempt at a census, because it was based on a thing called the Hearth, H-A-R-T-H, tax rolls. Because, you know what I mean, there's only 2 things certain in life, taxes and debt. And in them days, they say, would you believe, if you had a chimney piece or a hearth worth mention, you were taxing it. So obviously what happened was, if you could conceive from the authorities that you had a chimney piece, you were going to avoid a tax or hearth. You had people of substance wanting everybody to know just a minute.
I have enough money to light before.
And then you obviously had people who lived in maybe hovels, whatever, we won't say hovels, whatever. So the figures I'm going to quote for Balbriggan, for Balbriggan and Balscadden, just to place things in context, can possibly be doubled or trebled. And to put things in context, I'll just read out the statistics for what is now just a village of Balscadden. And for 1659, you had 190 people, right? 167 Irish people, 23 English people, settlers, whatever.
Yeah.
Now, Balrodry, 204 people. I don't know whether either of you lads have read this text, or have you ever read this? Have you any idea, lads? I'm going to put this on the spot now. In comparison to those 2 figures, you can have a guess of what the population of Balbriggan was then in 1659.
Well, we're counting fireplaces now as opposed to people.
Correct. Very good.
Jeez, I couldn't tell you.
I'm going to become smart because 30
then-
Irish, 30 people.
30.
That's all.
30.
Now, think about it. That just shows you there was no town as we understand it. There was no harbour. There were no mills. There were just 2 farms belonging to the Barnwell family.
Yeah.
That's a story for another day, because they were the prime owners of this land and movers and shakers for about 250 years in North County Dublin. Their main castle was in Drimnagh, still standing. Turvey House in Donabate. And this is a lesser house in Bromore, right?
Yeah.
Now, everything they had was sold in 1727. One of the Barnwell girls married a guy called Henry Bagenal, and everything was sold to the Viscount Shelburne. And they were followed then very soon after by the Hamilton family, and they masterminded the harbour and the mills.
Yeah.
So that's another story. Okay, so that's an example of
people.
just how quickly Balbriggan has developed. And if you look at whatever, we might ask ourselves maybe, in that case then, how, with a space of 150 years or maybe less, did Balbriggan rise from being a tiny little series of farmlands to being, in the mid-40s, a town of such industrial repute that it gave its name to items of hosiery in American, like in 1900 and before and afterwards, in Chicago or St. Louis or New York, you could see in the shop window Balbriggan's for sale. Yeah. And if you look up an American dictionary to this day, not an encyclopedia, it has found its way into American language as an item of hosiery made in the seaside town of Balbriggan, etc. So we start with the development of the harbour, which is a story in itself, and then we have the cotton mill. One of the first 3 cotton mills in Ireland was set up by Hamilton in 1780. And then there were 2 other mills built up as well. Then, of course, you have the coming of the railway in 1844, the second oldest railway in Ireland, bringing a huge amount of employment into the town, etc. So people would have moved in then from the areas of Balscadden and Balrottery. They would have had maybe casual labouring, that's all.
Yeah.
And they would have got jobs in the factories, whatever, and probably stayed, whatever. Now, I'm just going to dwell for a moment, lads, on, we always start our walkabouts with this,
Yeah.
which is the place name of Balbriggan. So you'll probably know this yourselves, lads. What is the current accepted or official Irish for Balbriggan? As seen on, go on. Yeah.
Well, that's it. It's what's accepted, I suppose.
Go on.
The Balbriggan.
Exactly.
But,
Yeah, we use the word accepted advisedly so, because, in my opinion, and this is where I go off piece a little bit, just because a local authority says a town is based in certain Irish, these change over the years.
Yeah.
And sometimes different authorities are making decisions. It could be the Folklore Commission, it could be the National Roads Authority, it could be the local council. And of course, before Dublin County Council come into being, you had the Balrottery Board of Guardians who looked after housing and sewage, etc. And of course, before that, you had the Ordnance Survey of Ireland.
Yeah.
And 2 greatest scholars were John O'Donovan and Eugene O'Curry. And they went around most of Ireland looking at place names and translating them into English, because the Gaelic place hadn't been translated.
Yeah.
But they never came to a place like Balbriggan, because there was very little Irish tradition left. So for many years, the accepted version of Balbriggan apparently was and is Balbriggan. But then, why is it called Balbriggan?
Well, that's again, I suppose isn't there, from what I know, there's 2, well, there could be more, but I suppose there's 2. There's it's like Ballion, Brackon, and something else. But there's one town of Little Fish, and there's town of Little Hills, and there's a couple of...
You've mentioned 3 in one. The Turin you mentioned is the one that's commonly accepted, Balbriggan. Now, we went to school and we weren't too bad at Irish, lads. What's the Irish for a hill or a summit?
Jeez, you think I'd know that, wouldn't you?
No, I'm not being rude. But there's a 4-letter word beginning with C. Canuck.
Canuck, Jesus.
Remember Canuck?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So then, I mean, what's Brie? Now, I'm told, and I can't, that apparently an old Irish word for hill was B-R-I-G-H, Brie. And it meant the town of the small hills, right?
Yeah.
And when I'm on a walkabout, I say to people, look, let's look up Balbriggan. Compared it to Skerries or Malahide, it's not flat. I mean, let's face it, there's a series of inclines. And as you know, what is the highest summit overlooking Balbriggan? It's called
Clonard Hill.
Clonard Hill.
Yeah.
And Clonard comes from the Irish Clun, for a meadow or a pasture or a lea. The high meadow.
Yeah.
The high field overlooking Balbriggan, and it gives its name to Clonard Street, one of the oldest streets winding its way up to the base, to Clonard Court and Clonard Rise.
Yeah.
Okay, now that's fair enough. But now you mentioned the town of Small Trout, and when we started with Historical Society in 81, and even before that, I remember talking to elderly people. I never heard about it beginning until that stage. They said they loved the older that you mentioned, that years ago the stream that we now call the Bracken was much wider, and little tiny vessels could go much further up to where there was a bridge now. There wasn't always a bridge. That bridge, which gives it into Bridge Street, only dates from, say, the middle 1800s as such. But they always felt that the very first settlement of Balbriggan, the very first settlement, would have been on a Keith Street, and fishermen earning a living, whatever. So obviously it might have been a source of trout, okay, maybe sea trout.
Yeah.
And of course the Irish for trout as a noun is brack.
Yeah.
But also as an adjective, it means speckled. What is the highest summit in Fingal, lads?
It's probably up where I live, is it?
If you're going up to Nag's Head, if you're going up to Nag's Hill, Knockbrack. Knockbrack is the highest summit, and there's Knockbrack, the speckled hill. Sorry?
That's the Knockbrack passage to him is literally straight
Yeah.
across from where I live, as in across the road. And
That's not Brack, yeah. So now, and the stream, of course, we know is called the Bracken Stream. That flows underneath the harbour.
And the canal.
And the canal. And we know ourselves, lads, that in our lifetime, it gave its name to a boxing club that your father was very much involved in.
correct. Yeah.
To a soccer team in Craven Park called the Bracken Rangers. And growing up in the 50s, two ex-soldiers, Charlie Moore and Mr. Casey, set up like an academy.
Yeah.
And I used quite a good soccer player, and you go over to the house and you tog it in the house. And by God, if you had to have 2 feet, if the ball came to your left foot and you didn't meet it, it was a free. No such thing as only having a left foot. And some years later, and I was delighted to see it, that Dublin County Council renamed the park, or have a plaque, Charlie Moore Memorial Park.
Yeah.
Because all he did for the people.
Yeah.
So that's Bracken. And some years ago, when the new hotels were built, you know the story yourselves, there was a competition among the populace to see what a new hotel would be called.
Yeah.
And Mary Canaan,
Or Cannon.
Cannon, correct? She came up with the idea,
Yeah.
Bracken Court Hotel, and she won a prize for it. When we were talking to her, she could confirm that story.
Yeah.
Now, Bracken, of course, in English language, is a form of a fern.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we have the town, the small trout, the town, the small hills. Now, I think you mentioned a third one. Oh, yeah. A guy called P.W. Joyce, and he was a writer. Around about 1930, he wrote a 2-volume book called Names of Irish Places.
Yeah.
And he came up with a version that I've never been able to corroborate. And he said, I'll try to quote him now from memory, he said, Balbriggan was Balbriggan, capital Bhrecan. And he said, Brecon being a very usual personal name.
Yeah.
Might have been, but in 40 years of research, I've never come across a landlord or a holy man or a chieftain called that. Now, you have St. Bricken, and we have the military hospital in Dublin, St. Bricken's military hospital. But again, I've nothing to corroborate that. But when I went to Balbriggan school, and when I was 12 years old, I was a bit of a, not a, what would you call it, a swat. But I loved learning, I loved history and geography, and it was lashing rain. I might spend the time in Mr. Madden's room, and there was a map on the back wall, a layer scale.
Yeah.
And all of the names were in Irish. He had a strong Irish ethos. And to this day, I can remember the Irish names like Dangany Coosh for Dingle and Durla Sela. But the Irish for Balbriggan bore no relation to Balbriggan or Balbriggan.
Yeah.
I try to remember it. I think it was Balbriggan with a fada on the last day.
Yeah.
And I never had the temerity to ask Mr. Madden what it meant. But recently I bought a basic Irish English dictionary in Eason's, and I looked up Bracon, and it means a piece of old clothing. But you can't add 2 and 2 and make 6 here. Yeah. So I think when it comes to place names, I don't think we can be that definite about it. And I want to tell you a little funny story too, lads, in relation to place names. About 2 months ago, I had the honour of giving a slideshow on the history of Balscadden in the hotel. It was packed out. Yeah. I love that village. My sister Margaret's been living there for years. I just think it's a lovely village. I call it my Shangri-La. But it's tremendous history going back to the 1200s. Yeah. It belonged to the monks of the Holy Trinity, Christ Church, and all the tithes and all the whatever. And we all, the people of the Anglo-Normans who farmed there in the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th century, etc., etc. But one day in the 90s in Balbriggan Library, my sister Margaret, who was very active in the community, she said to me, Jim, what's the Irish for Balscadden? I said, I think it's Ballia and Skaddaw, the town of the herrings. That's what we thought. And she said, what's Ballia Vic Dun? That sounds like Ballymadun. Did you ever hear of Ballymadun? It's out towards Ballyball ways. So I think the lads have put, at that stage, the council had put lovely big standards on each side of the village, welcome to whatever, 30 mile speed limit. So immediately it occurred to me that on that particular day, they put the wrong one outside Balscadden, the wrong 2. Yeah. And did the same 2, put the ones in Ballymadun. So for one day, Balscadden morphed into Ballymadun. So I couldn't lose the opportunity. I was out of wet my slides. Yeah. I took a slide of that. So I'm now able to show that as part of my slide.
It's there, yeah.
But I didn't have the wherewithal or to go to Ballymadun and finish the story. But that's neither here nor there. Can I just also say, this is a pure personal idea of mine. I've never published it and I'm open to correction. During the lockdown, living on my own, I was quite cut off, and lucky enough I had books to turn to. I just decided to start studying one item, which is Old Norse, which is the language that the Norwegians spoke, or the Scandinavians spoke when they invaded Scotland, the Orkney Islands, England, here. And you can look up, Google search your smartphone, Old Norse words. And obviously then we know that the Swedes never come down here. When they went a Viking, what they did was, in those days, the Norwegians and the Danes, they sowed the seeds in the spring. They went for what was called a Viking. It's not a noun, it's a verb. They call it plundering. Of course, when they hit Ireland and England and found the monasteries, they hit the mother lode.
Yeah.
They couldn't believe there was no defence.
Yeah.
And I've read all sorts of books about the Vikings. What they were looking for was silver, particularly, that you could melt down, because they used silver as for barter. So when they went all over Europe, they traded the silver for Rhenish wines and silks, etc., whatever. But any word in the English language now with SK, like skirt and skull and skerries, are pure Old Norse words, which apparently are still recognisable in Iceland. And come to skerries. We all know where skerries is. I went to Stella there for 6 years or 5 years. Now, if you look at a map of northern Scotland, you'll see the Skerry Isles.
Yeah.
And it's pure Norse, where a group of rocky islets or small little. Therefore, they must have had some settlement in Skerries, because the term Skerries is in use.
Yeah.
But the Irish on it is Nishkeri, which is meaningless. It should be the Carnegie for the rocks, you know. Yeah. And as you drive into Skerries, do you know where the Hoare Rock is? You ever heard of the Hoare Rock? Well, the Hoare Rock, H-O-R-E or H-O-A-R, look it up. That's a pure Norse term. It means grey, right? That's the grey rock. Yeah. And a hoar frost means a grey frost. And therefore, the Irish for that should be an Clochlia. And other words, I'm glad now this has gone this way, lads, because I've never written this down. but this is lovely, I think. When we were growing up in my time, and your father's times and grandfather's times, we'd say, make sure that dog doesn't stick in you. Did you ever hear the term a dog?
A dog.
A dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, you heard the term.
Like, a briar.
A briar. Or a thorn.
Or a thorn, yeah.
Correct. And only in the last few years, I'd say anybody from outside will bring it now. It's a dog. I'd say it's a thorn or a briar. Well, about a year ago I said, right, I look up the Oxford English Dictionary. Yeah. The word dock, as in the ALK, does not exist. It's not an English word. Oh. It's a pure Scandinavian word for a thorn, which means we, in Balbriggan at least, have been using a pure Danish word without realising it. And here's the lovely one for you: Docky Island. Yeah. Any place name ending in EY in Old Norse means an island. So Docky Island is the eye of the Thorns. Now I think in Irish they have Inish na Jelly, you know. I just think, what I'm probably trying to say is, I think we often we've underestimated influence that the Vikings left on this island, particularly in the greater Dublin area. Yeah. Because they ruled the roost for several hundred years. Mm. And even at the Battle of Clontarf, they still were in Dublin City. And around the 10th and 11th century, Dublin was the slave capital of Europe. They were interested in two things: silver and slaves, right? And men and women. And it was the slave capital. So, and that's neither here nor there. So I'm convinced there are other terms that we use. Oh yeah, there was another term, lad, sorry, I'm digressing. Another term we used growing up, and we used to say, make sure that corrower doesn't bite you. And years ago, I bought a dictionary. I wanted to improve my Irish standard dictionary. I went page after page after page. And the man was called Father Denis, and it was a standard Irish dictionary. Yeah. In the old spelling. Yeah. With the R, which looked like an S, and the dots and all the rest. Yeah, yeah. And I came across a word, Carabhar, corrower. It's the Irish for a horsefly. So there's two words we were using as part of our ordinary speak. Yeah. But I mean, the dog is a much older vintage, etc. type of thing. You know?
And dog is something that I remember.
Of course you do, because we use it, but we didn't realise its origin. Oh. And I just feel sometimes maybe we've forgotten about the Vikings. So Are you happy with that, lads, tonight? I think I've covered an awful lot.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I think we've come sort of to a nice logical end here. We've only used one page of text.
One page of text.
So when you think of it, there's so much ahead of us in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Second page, different subjects, whatever.
Yeah.
And thanks very much, lads, because I didn't realise it would work out this nicely.
Yeah.
But it's a lovely setting. And you see, the three of us were talking to the converted. And we're all from the area. I would say one thing. Some years ago, I was interviewed just for a few moments in the hotel. I think there was a community television service in Swords, and I said, I'd say a few words. And I think she was a female interviewer. She said, look, how would you sum up Balbriggan? Well, I said, look, you can say what you like. I know from Balbriggan, but the history of it, it's still got heart and a soul. I said, I know it's changing. I know the population's changing and geography. But people still say hello to you. We're still a friendly people. Yeah. And I'm not saying that with any due disrespect to neighbouring Fingal towns. So, but I think, we haven't lost that.
Leave that to us.
And we haven't lost that. I don't think we've lost that. We still talk to people on the square, don't we? As you said, how's it going now?
Come here every day.
How's it going now?
Talk to everybody.
That's what I mean. That is it.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jim, look,
okay, lads.
Thanks very much for that. Absolutely fantastic.
So I hope we picked me up.
And we pick up again with you. Good. Whenever we'll, as they say, touch base and that sort of thing, and we'll.
Thanks for the invitation, lads. I enjoyed it.
Oh, we really enjoyed that, Jim. Lads, so yeah, look, that's us this week. Hope he's enjoyed that. As I said, hopefully we'll have a bit more from Jim for you all. Hopefully fairly soon we'll work it out. I'll contact your agent, Jim.
I forgot about to say that. I have a Hollywood agent. Yeah, I know people. I've been doing quizzes for years, and people say to me, "What's your fee?" I say, "I don't know the fee. I just love doing it because I can. I do it for schools and whatever. This is fantastic. Anything I know, I'm passing on. I hope it's accurate. I hope my father wasn't entirely true."
No, but look, come here. This is what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Next week we'll be talking about robots, guys.
Go on.
See you next week, everybody.
Oh, Jimmy.